Your relationship is there to reflect back to us where we still have something that's holding us back, where we're still hurting, where we hold on to something. Every time we get a trigger, it's a gift. I was having a good career, doing well for myself. I was feeling good. I was making good money, but I felt that what I was doing wasn't fulfilling for me. I noticed that I wasn't doing that for myself. I was doing my job to impress other people. I didn't know that I was driven by this story that I'm not enough. I didn't see it. I didn't ever see it. When it was pointed out to me, it was blindly obvious. I was like, wow, how come I never saw that? And then I saw it play out everywhere in my life. It was a moment where everything broke down for me. So I was wondering, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do about my relationships? I noticed, well, it's actually just me who says I'm not enough. It's actually just me who says I'm not a great guy. It clicked for me, and I was flooded with emotions of joy, of happiness, of ease. It's a split second that changed everything for me.
Sven Loss, welcome to the Deeply Aligned podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. We're going to talk a lot about relationships, of course, and your expertise as a relationship coach. But we're also going to talk about kind of my favorite topic of what it takes to go after your biggest aspirations and dreams and pursue a life of freedom, purpose, and further alignment. And we had conversations about your journey before, and this is something I always like to highlight on the podcast with each and every guest. And that is the journey kind of like out of the 9 to 5 and into more of the world of online business or starting something that you once upon a time had like a pivotal moment, shift in perspective, shift in mindset, and you want to change. Could you walk us through your journey and your pivotal moments there?
Of course, yeah. So that started like a few years ago now. I was working in a corporation at the time, financial services. It was a software company, and I was having a good career. Like I was doing well for myself. I was feeling good for a time. I was making good money, but I felt that what I was doing wasn't fulfilling for me. And at the same time, a relationship that I was in came to an end. And so I was wondering, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do about my relationships? And it was a very hard moment for me. It was a moment where everything broke down for me. And then I really questioned, because in the relationship, as similar to in the job that I was working at, I noticed that I wasn't doing that for myself. I was doing my job to impress other people. I was following what I thought would make me happy, and I was looking out into the world and saw, okay, other people that seem happy, they earn a lot of money, they have a good career, they are famous, and that's what I was trying to pursue. But I saw that that wouldn't make me happy. And so I came to a moment where I questioned everything. And it was in that moment when I asked myself, what do I want? What does make me happy? And there was a long time when I thought, I don't know what I want. I don't know what I really want to do. And then it was a big mindset change where I just told myself, well, what if I, instead of repeating this story that I don't know what I want to do, what if I just tell myself I know what I want to do? And so I said, okay, I know what I want to do. While at the same time, I didn't have the clue. But it was maybe 2-3 days later, I was in the shower, and it all dawned on me, it clicked, and I was like, I want to help other people on this journey, on this healing journey, on helping people with their relationships. And it was literally in that moment, I came out of the shower, I ran to my phone, looked up, at the time I was living in Switzerland, looked at certifications to become a coach, to become someone that could help other people. And in that moment, when I was standing there with a towel, signed up for a discovery call with a coaching certification. And that's where it all began. And then it took me down this path.
We talked before the camera started rolling, like psychedelic experiences and stuff like this. Is this what you relate to? One of those moments when you got that download, it clicked like intuitively of like, this just is it. This feels right. In the shower.
That was one of those moments where I felt like it all clicked. But that moment that I mentioned before we started recording was a moment prior to that. As I said, at that time or prior to that time, my relationship came to an end. And it was also the time when I started getting help myself. I hired a coach, I hired a therapist. And there was a very distinct moment that I mentioned. It was at the beginning of this journey, because I had a session with my therapist at the time. And I noticed that throughout this coaching session, I noticed that in my relationship, I repeated a pattern, which was I felt I was not enough, and I tried to compensate for it. So then maybe 2-3 weeks after that coaching session, I was sitting in that office of that company that I was referring to. And I was preparing a presentation for one of the C-levels of the company. And because I was still in that mindset of, I need to convince everyone that I'm a great guy. I need to convince everyone that I actually am good enough. It was in that moment that it clicked for me that I tried to convince that C-level person so that C-level person could say, great job, Sven. And then for a split second, I could say, wow, yeah, I am good enough. Right? Or I am a great guy. And it was in that moment that I noticed it's actually me who holds the power, right? I give that power to that C-level. Like, who is that in the end? It could be a random person on the street, but I give so much importance because he's a C-level. And I notice I hold that power. And when I noticed, well, it's actually just me who says I'm not enough. It's actually just me who says I'm not a great guy. It clicked for me, and I was flooded with emotions of joy, of happiness, of ease. I started crying right there at my desk. And then I took some time off. I went to the rooftop of the company, sunny day, and I just cried for hours. I was so happy. And that was the moment that I decided, okay, in some sort of way, I want to give this feeling to other people. I want to learn how I can replicate that for others.
Makes sense. Yeah. It sounds like the catalyst for everything became the relationship coming to an end. You're going into coaching and therapy.
Yeah.
You start questioning relationship, but also a lot more areas in life.
Yeah.
And eventually you start asking these questions, which I love. Is like, what would I do if I truly love myself?
Yeah.
Or what would I stop doing if I truly love myself?
Yeah.
Because you realize that I'm giving power to external forces of letting them tell me if I'm good enough or etc.
Yeah.
But I actually have that power myself.
Correct. I was giving it to that C-level. I was giving it to my friends. I was giving it to my girlfriend at the time, my family. Right. And it was a game where I felt like I was always on stage performing for them. And then if they say, yeah, you're a great guy, then I can rest for a second, but then it goes on.
Yeah.
Then the next step comes and the next step comes. Yeah. And then when I got out of that game, when I noticed, wow, I hold the power. I can decide that. Right. Then, right. What you mentioned with self-love. Self-love, in my opinion, is the extension of dropping that. And then self-love is there. Right. If I believe I'm not enough or I'm not a great guy, it's really hard to love myself with that because I will always say I'm not enough. But once I drop it, self-love is there. And yeah, then I could really start to take care of myself. I could really start to say, hey, what do I want? If I don't have to audition for everyone, what do I want?
Yeah.
And that opened up all the gates for me.
I think there's a lot that people can learn from that. Like when you actually start prioritizing yourself for real. And like you say, asking, what do I want?
Yeah.
What do I truly want?
Yeah.
And not be afraid of like go into that reflection and also later on even take action upon it.
Yeah. Yeah. And starting to see what's in the way of me asking that?
Mm.
Rather than like trying to ask that question as a compensation, like, well, what do I want? What do I want? I know I don't feel happy now. What do I want? But right, the big realization for me came that I was holding on to something, the belief that I'm not enough, which wasn't a belief, it was unconscious for me, but that was in the way. Once that's removed, everything is there.
Mm.
Right? Self-love is always there, but there's just something in the way.
Yeah.
And we get to remove what's in the way. And yeah, people come through to that through painful experience. Right? How you came to your realization. For me, it was the job, and it was that relationship that came to me.
Yeah. Like these things are never going to give me the things that I enjoy, or these things are never really going to make me happy in the long run. So at least I know that path is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And even though I don't know what new path will be like, at least I know I should make a change from the current path.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time I had no idea. Right? I just knew, okay, I want to go into coaching. I don't know what that looks like. I have no idea what a coach actually does. Like how do they operate? Of course, I have my experience of being coached, but being on the other side of that, no idea what that would look like.
Mm.
And then, everything is uncertain, right? After that, and all the things that happen, could have never predicted any of it. Even sitting here with you now in Bali, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
Right.
It is amazing, the evolution.
Yeah.
What do you think was so appealing for you with what coaching potentially could give contra what you got from the finance 9 to 5?
Yeah. The finance and the 9 to 5 gave me, or I earned money. And it gave me, well, people acknowledge it and people validated it and said, well, it's so cool, Sven. Those were the stories that I heard from my friend. So cool, Sven, that you work in finance, that you work in Switzerland, in that country. And it was very externally focused, right? And coaching offered a way to fulfill me on the inside, right? I believe everybody inherently wants to help others. We're social creatures. We actually really want to be there for one another. And coaching offered a way for me to do exactly that, right? Helping others, which of course it also helps me. I get a good feeling out of it, but I'm doing something that can help someone else to get out of the mode of suffering. So I fill up internally. When I fill up internally, I have more to give, right? It's this cycle. Whereas the other path was very exhausting for me because it was very externally focused, right? Well, if I get to the next step, then people will validate me even more. They will think I'm an even greater person. But it left me very exhausted. And internally, I tried to fill a hole with something external, with money, with validation, with how other people perceive me. And I noticed that would never, ever be enough to fill that hole.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Like your mess becomes your message, and coaching is kind of like teaching, where whatever you learn, the more you learn, the more you grow, and the more you master your specific subjects and craft, the more you have to give, which is fulfilling.
Yeah.
So that's the amazing part.
Yeah, and like on top of that, what I love about it is I love learning about myself. I love learning to get to new levels for myself. Right? So now I have a combination of I learn more about myself, I can help people more. Right? So a lot of the time that I spend working is working on myself. It's not, like, sure, I write content, I work with people one-on-one, but a lot of the time I'm trying to learn more about myself, realizing more about myself. And that's awesome.
Yeah. It's investing into yourself and your mission.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more the more precise I get, the better I get at understanding myself, the better I get at listening to other people, hearing where they are and helping them there. I love that.
What is your mission today?
My mission today is it's connected to that moment that I had in that office. That feeling of freedom, joy, happiness, bringing that to as many people as I can. It's always funny to think, but it was this one moment that changed my whole life. It's a split second that changed everything for me. But knowing that this feeling is there and that other people can experience that, that's my mission, to bring that to as many people as I can. And I'm fortunate that I can touch and reach a lot of people through my videos currently, and I want to continue on that path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everyone starts out somewhere, right? And you weren't able to reach so many people in the beginning. But the opportunity is there for anyone and everyone.
Yeah.
Tap into their mission, tap into their deepest alignment and excitement. Create content authentically, and you will resonate with people eventually when you find a way.
Absolutely.
Could you walk us through that a little bit for someone who is, they're getting this realization of, I want to change things up. I want to do something different. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but maybe I want to dig into this area, whether that's, relationship, wealth, or health. And I want to teach people on a certain thing. And I want to go into online business or coaching. What is that next step? Like, as soon as they become really good at their craft and learn a lot by going through the journey themselves, how does that look like to get their first 1, 2, 3 clients? Like, what does that look like for someone?
Yeah, that can be super tricky. I believe one of the biggest helpers on my journey was trust, because I made everything up, right? I was at the time I was sitting in a little flat in Zurich, 1.5 rooms, 35 square meters, and then I made up a story of, well, I will be able to reach thousands, hopefully millions, with the work that I'm doing. So I just let that vision inspire me and say, okay, if I am there, pretending right now I'm at that point, how do I feel? And what would I do? And I let that inspire me. And funnily enough, because I was touching into that feeling, I was visualizing, I was feeling how I would feel reaching so many people. The creativity came from that energy. And then I started somewhere, right? I switched my Instagram account from a private account to a business account and posted my first video. Recording that first video took me a month. And it was, looking back at it now, I would never post a video like that again. But I just started somewhere, and I allowed myself to be, can I swear on this podcast? To be shit, right? I wasn't good at that time, and that I had a compassion towards myself and said, okay, I just start somewhere and take it a level more. Then the next challenge was showing more of myself, right? I like to bring humor into things, so then I also tried to reflect that in my content. And the more I was myself, the more natural I could be on camera in a video, the more it resonated with people. So I believe the first step is just taking one, right? Doing something. Like, there are many, many things that, right, when I look back at when I started my coaching business, I want a website, I want an Instagram channel, I want videos, content, right? So many things, but just start somewhere. Take the first step, and everything that happens after the next step will take you to the next one. Like, it's a snowball.
So much to unpack there. There's progress over perfection. Action precedes clarity.
Yeah.
Also, in the beginning, I mean, what I hear is like, you're kind of describing what many people would say as like, what's the secrets to manifesting and law of attraction and reality creation? It starts with a vision. Could be a vision board, could be writing down your goals on a daily basis. So you can visualize how would that look like and how would that make me feel?
Yeah.
Because the feeling is kind of the secret. Like, it's good to shift your mind and think affirmations and positive thoughts, but it all needs to lead to how you feel, because depending on how you feel, that's how you're going to take action or not.
Yeah.
If you feel excited, you will take action. If you feel doubtful, you will take less action.
Yeah.
And it's the actions, like you said, a few steps that is actually going to provide you some results. And then you're in this positive loop where the more action you take, the more results you get.
Yeah.
And then you're getting more confident.
Yeah.
More in authenticity, alignment. And
Correct.
Here you go. You're on your way.
Yeah. Yeah. And believing it, right? Really believing it. Because as I said, I was sitting in a 35 square meter apartment. I had no proof that anything could work. Like, right? A lot of people, I think they wait until they see it, till they can believe it. But I just believed it. I felt like I could walk on water at the time. I was happy every day. I was joyful every day because I wasn't living in that 35 square meter apartment. I was living in, damn, I'm so excited for everything that's going to happen. I post this video, I do this, and that's what took me forward. Right? And as you say, it's that feeling that propels me into action and gave me the creativity to come up with ideas that would actually take me to the point that I envisioned to be in. And that's beautiful. So most of all, it was a feeling of having broken through a lot of the barriers that held me back. So what you said, right? Mindset shift. I believe the mindset shift opened up that feeling of freedom, and then I could operate from that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And naturally, because it's a different resonance, right? It's a different vibration, if you may say so, because you change the words that you speak, right? I was living in a world of I'm not enough, and that's a vibration, right? I'm not enough is words, and then I change the words, and so I live in a different world, different vibration.
Yeah,
and that was beautiful. Yeah.
It's super fascinating. And this is what I think I'm passionate about. Like, I want to understand and how to break all of this down.
Yeah.
Because, we speak about vibrational frequencies as well. And it's like, no matter what we believe in, whether we believe in God or the universe or some higher power.
Yeah.
If you don't love yourself and you don't believe that you are worthy to receive, if we think about there's another higher power out there that is going to give you certain things. If you're not ready to receive, how is that thing gonna be able to give you anything?
Yeah, it's right.
You're like repelling it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, you're in resistance to it, so then it can't come. But it can be very tricky to see what we're actually driven by, right? As in that example of my own journey, I didn't know that I was driven by this story that I'm not enough. I didn't see it. I didn't ever see it. When it was pointed out to me, it was blindly obvious. I was like, wow, how come I never saw that?
Yeah.
And then after that session, I saw it everywhere. I saw it play out everywhere in my life. And only then I could do something about it. And it's what I also really want to emphasize, it doesn't have to take years. It doesn't have to be an exhausting process of, oh, how do I get rid of this? How do I? Well, it's more a seeing that, well, that's just the world that I lived in.
Yeah.
I choose to live in that world. Now I can also choose to live in another world. That takes courage and that takes practice to step into another world. But it's not a process that takes years. If you want it to take years, right? You create your reality. It can take years, but it also doesn't have to, right? What I want to speak to I opened my Instagram account, or I switched it from a private Instagram account to a business account in August. And 7 months later, I went from 500 followers to 150,000. And it was not a process of years. It was a process of, okay, I'll put a video out there. I'll put another video. And I felt really uncomfortable posting the video. The first video that I posted, I opened Instagram, hit post. I buried it under the pillows. Didn't want to look at it for hours. And then I looked at it and was like, wow, the resonance is actually really good. And I had many, many moments where I felt really uncomfortable posting it, and I did it.
Takes a lot of courage, like you say.
Yeah.
Stepping into the unknown is scary.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, what I would try to make people understand, that, yeah, it is scary to surrender to the unknown. It's super scary and requires a lot of courage. But it is also, it is the thing that's going to provide the breakthrough, right?
Absolutely. And mostly, right, because you say so, the unknown. We're usually not afraid of the unknown itself. It's what we think that's in the unknown. Right? The anything that is in the future, we can write that story ourselves. It's only that we think, well, but this could go wrong, and this could go wrong, and that could go wrong. And we hold on to that, and then we try to avoid that in ways. We actually have the power to write anything about the future. There is nothing in the future other than what we think is there. All right, so I wouldn't say it's really the unknown. It's all the negative stuff that we project into the unknown. That can hold us back.
True.
Because you could also just say, well, everything is just awesome in the future. Like there are no problems, of course. There are always problems. We know that. But it's not the unknown. It's really like all the negative things that we think is in the unknown that could hold us back.
Yeah. And that's what you seem to have done a good job on, whether that was conscious or not, where you were quite naturally able to, instead of this, what if it doesn't work? You were like, what if it does work?
Yeah.
What if it turns out like this in a good way?
Yeah.
How would that feel? Like, oh, that would feel amazing. So let's go for it.
And I believe, like, looking back now, I felt like a freak, because you could put me to a sunset and I would start to cry. And every morning I would literally start the day by crying how joyful the life is that I'm steering towards. I really got into it. And then there's nothing that can really stop that. Of course, there will always be obstacles. There will always be challenges. But that doesn't have to make life harder.
Yeah.
And I felt like a freak, right? Because I didn't know anyone to relate to that in my friendship circle or in the social circle that I was in. Nobody felt like that. Nobody operated like that. Nobody talked like that. And I had to make it all up.
Yeah.
Right?
Same with me, I remember.
Yeah.
Couple final things before we move on from here. Do you remember doing anything particular, like as a continuous, consistent practice during that period? Did you do anything particularly when you woke up, of like journaling or going for a walk and like thinking about how your life could potentially be amazing in the future?
I did that for some time, but I felt very restricted by it. That it is a practice. It is something that I do because then I felt like I was starting to be dependent on that tool, on that something. But what I did was feeling grateful. And not writing something down that I'm grateful for, but feeling grateful. Whenever I went under the shower, I felt into it, like how thankful I am that I'm healthy, how thankful I am that I have a family that's healthy, that I am in contact with my family, that I have friends. And it does just that feeling of gratitude allowed me to be joyful, to be grateful. And then, every now and then to remind me when I got stuck in some story of I'm not enough, just to remind me, hey, that's not true. I'm free. It was more, getting back to that feeling of, well, I'm free. Everything is available. So it wasn't too much of a practice. Of course, I do take care of myself. I work out every day. I take time for myself to reflect on things. But there's not so much of a practice that I go through.
This is a great transition, I think, because, I mean, when you think about yourself and others as a relationship coach, many people think about relationships in terms of couples, but a very big part is just relationship to self as well.
Yeah.
Which is where everything starts, like internal game, where you start loving yourself and thinking yourself worthy, and then many positive things comes after that.
And the relationship to ourselves plays out in relationships and plays out in life around us, in work. It's everywhere, right? This bit that I was speaking about, feeling I'm not enough, right? That's my relationship to myself. Right? I believe I'm not enough. That's my relationship to myself. So then I would say, well, I don't get what I want in my relationship because I'm not enough. Like I'm not enough of a boyfriend. Like, then it's okay to not get as much back from my partner or feel as loved from my partner because I'm not enough. Right? And then I first need to strive for more. I first need to be a better boyfriend. And that same dynamic plays out in a job, or that plays out in my friendships. I remember in the past, I felt like I had to hold on to my friends so much. Like I was making sure I was a good friend to all of my friends. Which only later I noticed, well, that isn't true. My friends love me for who I am. I don't need to run after them. And also, if I have to run after friends, maybe they aren't really friends. Maybe they aren't really interested in who I am. So I could let go of that and all of that exhaustion. So everything I assert, everything in our life is based on the relationship we have with ourselves. The other point you probably brought up with feeling, I'm not worthy. Same thing. If you're not worthy, if you don't feel worthy, which can be very, very hard for people, well, then it's really hard to feel valued by life, valued by the universe. And it's really hard to attract money. It's really hard to earn money because you feel like, well, I'm not really worthy of it. You built that life based on this story.
It's hard to attract another partner that's going to see you as worthy as you want to.
Absolutely.
It feeds into everything, right?
Yeah.
I heard you say the reason why I know so much about relationships is because I was so bad at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's what I mentioned in the beginning. I was for a long time in my 20s, for example, I was single for 6 years. I was incredibly scared of getting involved with someone. And I was ruminating, well, will I ever find a girlfriend? Will I ever be in love again? How do I do that? How do I make it happen? Who do I need to beat in order to be in a relationship? And then I looked at other people, how they are, and I tried to copy that, to emulate that. And because I was driven by, well, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love, like for who I am. I was literally wearing a mask and I was suffering. At the time I was smoking, I was drinking a lot of alcohol to compensate for that stress that I was feeling internally. And from that relationship that I had with myself, of feeling not enough, of feeling not worthy, of not feeling loved, I attracted a relationship. And because that was the relationship that I had with myself, that's how I felt in that relationship. So I was trying to be the best boyfriend that I could imagine. I was trying to do everything right. And my partner at the time kept saying to me, like, you don't need to do all of that stuff. I would actually like you to be more of you and to be honest and to say what you want and what you don't want, which was, I didn't understand that. I could hear what she was saying, but to me that didn't make sense, right? Because I thought, well, then you will leave me. I need to be someone else so that you're not leaving me. Because if I am who I am, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy of love. So relationships were incredibly exhausting for me, and especially that relationship was exhausting to me, which was the relationship that led me to go and find a therapist, find a coach. And I remember that when I got into this world of understanding relationships, there was that topic of narcissism that came up. And then I was convinced, well, yeah, my ex-partner is a narcissist. All of that rabbit hole, watched everything there was to watch on that, because I was still blaming my partner for everything that happened, not knowing I'm in that relationship. I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing in this relationship because of the relationship that I have with myself. And only when I started to tidy that up, to look at myself, to heal the relationship that I have with myself, that's when things started to shift. So, right, of course, the things that happened in that relationship were very hurtful for her just as much as they were for me. But I had to realize that was driven because of how I related to myself. So yeah, if I showed up in the relationship the way that I showed up back then, I would still not feel good. And I would still make my partner be a villain, right? Because it was a relationship that I had with myself. So yeah, and that's why I say I was really bad at relationships. And I had to learn a ton to how to show up for my partner, how to be a good listener, and to not blame my partner for everything. Because it's very easy. It's very seductive to just do that. Right? I feel hurt because you say this. I feel hurt because you do that.
You're touching upon it now. How important is it to taking ownership, and specifically related to a relationship with another person?
I think it's the key. If I didn't take ownership, I would still be in the same position. I love talking about that because that relationship that I'm speaking about, that came to an end once. And then I went down all that rabbit hole of narcissism. My partner is this, my partner is that, my partner did this. Tried to learn and understand everything, how I need to behave and what I need to detect. And then a few months later, I ended up in that same relationship with that same person. Right? I was doing the opposite of taking any ownership. And so that relationship took the same trajectory, and we came to the same point of ending it. Then I took ownership, and then everything shifted. If we don't take ownership, because it's an illusion that the other person hurts us, it seems very convincing, right? The other person says that, now I'm hurt. But it can only hurt us if we also believe that, right? If my partner does something and I feel like, well, you're actually telling me I'm not enough, which she doesn't tell me. Like, that's usually not what happens. The partner doesn't stand there and say, you're not enough. But it's what we hear. Why do we hear that? Because we're sensible to that topic. And just imagine that situation. If I never felt like I'm not enough and someone told me, well, Sven, you're not enough, that can't do anything to me. It can only do something to me if I believe that. Right? So now it becomes a different game. Now I can see, well, that hurt me. Why did that hurt me? because there must be something in me that brings about that situation, or that makes me sensible to that topic. Maybe I experienced something similar in my past. So now it's a different game. Now I can say, okay, that hurts me. Why does that hurt me? What does that remind me of? What's in that for me? And then I can take that, I can take ownership of it, do something about it, transcend it. Now someone can tell me you're not enough, and I can say, yeah, interesting that you see it that way. Why do you see that? Why do you think that? Because it very often shows me more about who they are than it shows me about who I am, if I can be confident and certain about myself.
This shows up in so many ways, right? Where it starts with awareness of your own wound and trigger. And then when your partner says, hey, you haven't done the dishes, you haven't picked up the trash, you haven't done this. And then you get the trigger of like, oh, it feels like they're saying I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
But they're just saying something else that you interpret that because you have a certain wound.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of it, then it can escalate quite quickly. But
exactly. And then I have all that pain coming up inside of me. In that situation, I'm not doing the dishes. My partner points out you didn't do the dishes. Now I feel like, whoa. All that pain from my past where I felt like I'm not enough. I have all of that. I don't know how to deal with that. Now let me project that onto you, right? And then the fight begins. It's like, you hurt me, like all of this pain that my partner wasn't even responsible for. I'll put that onto you. And then the other person usually is on the other side of the spectrum. And then they get all that blame, all that hurt. So then they start to fight back. And we're not talking about the dishes anymore. We're talking about, this is my wound and you make me feel this. And the other person says, well, and you make me feel this. And now it's about something that's actually not transpiring in that moment. It's something in the past.
Yeah, deeply rooted childhood traumas and all of this.
Absolutely. And yeah, that always, like, it still happens in my relationship where something happens, I feel triggered, and now I have the choice. Okay, I can blame it all onto you, or I can see, what does that have to do with me? And that can be very tricky.
Yeah, very tricky. What are some of the most essential skills in a relationship in your experience? Is it communication? Is it showing compassion? Is it listening? Is it taking ownership of your own childhood traumas? What do you think?
Well, it is being responsible for my pain, right? I feel pain. It's not over there. It's not right? Someone says something and I feel pain. It's in my body. It's here, right? Taking ownership for that. And then I believe the other one is listening. It's actually the topic that whenever I speak about listening, whenever I post about listening, that gets most traction. And listening, it is communication, right? But even in communication, I believe the biggest part is listening. The first time I heard about that was in the book that probably everybody in the self-improvement industry reads about, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? It's all about listening. Or there's a book from Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. It's about negotiation. And he points out, look, a lot of the cases resolve because I listen and I reflect what I'm hearing, and even in hostage situations. So I believe listening is one of the skills we can. If we're good at listening, we can make the other person feel heard, seen, and understood. And that's love, right? That, for a lot of people, that equates to love. So if we can be good listeners, we can be a very good partner, I believe.
Yeah. On that topic, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see is coming up for couples?
And they can't listen, that they don't listen really, right? They listen with what you're saying, how does that impact me, right? You're saying this, what does that have to do with me? So we're not, right? An example I can share from my own relationship. Something that I struggled in my past was I felt like I was always blamed for a lot of stuff. I felt a lot of guilt. And now my partner could come to me and say, hey, Sven, when you said this, that really hurt me, right? And I felt all of my guilt coming up. So now I couldn't be any longer with what she's sharing with me. She shares that, hey, when you communicate like this, that hurts me. What I started to say, well, your pain is not my responsibility, right? I could take all of that. But it was because I was triggered. I had my pain from my past, right? That's where we come to listening again. I wasn't present. I was filtering what she said through my own lens, made it about me, and I wasn't with her any longer. I couldn't hear what she actually was telling me because I was triggered. Now, I could work with whatever triggered me, that guilt. I could see where that came from, how that ruled my life. I could drop a lot around that. And then now when my partner comes to me and says, hey, when you say this, that hurts me, I can say, okay, got it. What's a different way that I can show up for you? Right? And I believe a lot of people get a bit hung up on the actual skills of communication, of what to say in what situation, how to respond. But I believe every time we're not able to listen, it tells us something about ourselves, right? Another word that I like to play with is listening is equivalent to being present, right? Being in this very moment. And when we get triggered, that's a past wound that's speaking. So we're not in the present anymore. We're in the past. And now we get to resolve whatever is in the past so that we can stay in the present. Right. So yeah, listening is, I believe, one of the most important skills because in that very moment, right, my partner shares something that hurt her. I can't hear her. I start to defend myself. She feels alone. That's I think that's an epidemic that we see in our world. People feel alone. They feel lonely, even though they are in relationships, even though they have a partner, they have a wife, they have a husband. Yeah. They still feel lonely because of reasons like that. We're not really able to listen because we filter it all like, what does that have to do with me? What did I do wrong again?
Yeah. Because of a lack of communication and listening, there's a lack of either being seen, heard, or understood, right?
Correct.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, can one summarize it to being good at listening is like, that's usually why they say, reflect back what you're hearing. So you're focused on that you're hearing them correctly, that you get the meaning behind their words, and then that you still keep on focusing, what can we now do for you rather than making it about yourself?
Yeah, correct. Sometimes it can be super helpful to create a container, right? One of a really, really good listening tool to circumvent all of that is an imago dialogue. Right? It's about one person just shares whatever is on their heart, and the other person listens and receives that. So if we create a container where one person just listens and it's just about the other person, which ironically will lead both people together again, because we actually see how we contribute to the pain of the other person. And I also believe it's very important to start listening to ourselves, right? It comes back to the relationship that we have with ourselves. If we can't listen to someone else, it's a good indication that we're not really listening to ourselves, right? In that moment, someone shares something with me, I get activated. That's also something for me to look at. And it can be super powerful to, in that moment, concentrate on the other person and then later on deal with, okay, how can I listen to myself? What activated me there? How did I make this about myself? Right? It was someone else sharing something. I made it about myself, and then listen to ourselves. I believe a lot of listening and the power of, or accessing the power of listening comes down to how well do we listen to ourselves? How well do we allow ourselves to be with our sadness, to be with our anger, our shame? And the better we become at that, the better we become at listening to ourselves, the better we will be at listening to someone else.
Do you have some tools or relationship practices that you recommend to your clients?
I usually don't work with a lot of tools, simply because a tool can bring relief for a symptom, or can bring relief to a behavior, right? As an example, if someone is very anxious, or someone that is very hyperactive, we could go in and say, could be super helpful if you, right? I could be a coach and say, it's so helpful if you start to meditate, right? Calms yourself down. And it will help that person, right? They will have a different breathing pattern alone, and that will calm the nervous system, and they can take that calmness hopefully throughout the day. But we didn't really address why that person is anxious or is hyperactive in the first place. And I thought there's something below that, right? Someone that is anxious, someone that is hyperactive, may have grown up in an environment where they didn't feel safe, or where they felt a threat from a caregiver, or from a sibling, or from something external, maybe even crime rates. Right? And so that person, I could give them a tool and say, okay, meditate and then you're good. But now they are dependent on that tool. If that tool falls away, they are still stuck in that state. And I would say they are mentally and emotionally always stuck in that state. So for me, it's about addressing, why are you anxious in the first place? Why are you hyperactive? Why are you hypervigilant in the first place? What's in your past? What happened in your past that led you to be in this state? And then we can address that on an emotional and on a mental level, and help that person break free from that.
Mm.
And then they don't need that tool anymore. They don't need to meditate. You can meditate. Meditation is great. But you don't need to do it anymore, because that anxiousness, that hyperactivity isn't there anymore. That is an extension of a wound. And very often, people have certain behaviors, right? Something that's very popular is attachment styles. And I would argue a lot of the attachment behaviors, right? I was someone that was very anxious in the past. I was clinging onto my partner. But and I could learn a lot of different behaviors instead of clinging, to start to give them room. But I was driven by such a deep fear that was rooted somewhere in my past, and there were stories that I could break through. And I could have spent probably years on trying to implement different behaviors, which would leave me very exhausted. And instead, when I focused on the root cause, where did that come from? What are the moments that these behaviors started to come up? When I addressed that, all of the behaviors, the quote unquote unhealthy behaviors, started to dissipate automatically. So that's why I don't work a lot with tools. I'm way more interested to find out why someone does it in the first place. What have they learned? Who do they believe themselves to be that they have these behaviors? Right.
The deep root causes, right?
Correct.
Attachment styles, shadow work, traumatic healing.
Yeah, but even attachment style, I believe even the attachment style is a symptom of something.
Yeah.
Right? Someone anxious attachment, that they are driven by a fear that the other person is leaving. So, okay, where did you experience that? You did experience that probably somewhere in your past, right? And then you learn behaviors to cope with that. And then taking the coping mechanisms away from them, that can be very challenging and very, very hard. And I believe that doesn't really help them. So I'm more interested in, instead of saying, okay, that's your attachment style, it isn't. That's just something you learn. Let's go, why did you learn that in the first place? Let's address it right there. And shadow work, of course, that's one of the tools I also work with. But I usually go to the very root of the person. Who do they think they are? Who do they believe themselves to be, right? In that realm of I'm not enough. address that. And once that's addressed, all these behaviors fall away.
Love that. Yeah, that's why it's so valuable to have a coach to guide you in this process, because it's super hard to do oneself.
Absolutely. And I get it, like a lot, and there are a lot of coaches out there that would come in with advice, or right, if you do this, do that instead, and right, all these tools. I just found that addressing the root cause is more sustainable. Yeah. It's also faster, ironically, and it brings the actual relief to the person, because now they aren't dependent on that tool.
Exactly. Because otherwise it just becomes like a doctor giving a patient a pill without knowing even
absolutely,
what the symptom is, like,
exactly,
where it's coming from.
Yeah, like taking, for example, one of the things that I showed up in my life in the past a lot was acid reflux. A lot of acid reflux. And now I could go to a doctor and get a pill against acid reflux, but once I don't take that pill anymore, the acid reflux is back. And that's the same way the tools work. You can replace a behavior or try to do something about a behavior with a tool. Once you take that tool away, the behavior's back. So, yeah.
Thanks for sharing all of that. What are relationships for, in your opinion? Because I heard you speak about, like, we live in a mirror universe where relationship can be seen as a reflection of ourselves.
Yeah. I believe essentially a relationship is that to reflect back to us where we have a barrier, where we're held back, where we're not free. And we experience life through relationship. Even work is a relationship. Intimate relationships are a relationship, obviously. So they mirror back at us where we still have something that's holding us back, where we're still hurting, where we hold on to something. Every time we get a trigger, it's a gift. It doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like the complete opposite, but it is a gift because it shows us there's something in you that isn't resolved. And intimate relationships, in my opinion, are the best mirror for that. Of course, some people may argue the same applies to your job, your mission, your profession. I myself have found the biggest triggers, the biggest mirrors in relationship, in intimate relationships, especially.
What comes to mind lately is there's been a topic going on for a couple of weeks here where life is happening for you and not to you. Yeah. And this can be seen the same way, where anytime your partner is triggering you or whatever, remember, this is happening for you for some reason. It's here to teach you something about yourself, usually, where you can improve, where you can grow, rather than your partner is doing something to you and causing pain to you. Yeah. It's happening for you.
Exactly, right? Because we have the pain, right? The pain is in us. It's just, it comes to the surface because the other person says something or does something, but it's still something in you. And life happens for us. And it can be very, very hard. And there are moments where that feels incredibly challenging to take on that mindset and see, okay, how could this happen for me? But on some level, we did take part in creating that event, right? We work on a certain frequencies. We bring something to us, so we can transcend that frequency. That's at least how I see it. And life always happens for us. Always. Yeah.
Let's talk compatibility for a second. Compatibility in values and how important that aspect is in a relationship, of like seeing how our lives can progress together and be in alignment.
It's very important, right? If you don't align on what you want to create for your life, then the easiest example, or the example that demonstrates it very easily, is one partner wants to have kids, the other one doesn't. It's either one partner says, well, I want to have kids, or I will get kids so that you're happy, or the other person says, I'm giving up kids so that you're happy. That doesn't really work. So I always invite people to be really clear on what their values are for that relationship, for their intimate relationship. Then it is a constant checking. It's not like you have one conversation with someone on the first date, on the second, on the third date, and then, cool, yeah, my checklist is done. Now you checked all of these boxes. Now we could go into a relationship. That changes. You change. The other person changes. And maybe sometime down the road, these values do not align anymore. Like it isn't set in stone forever. But yeah, there are some values that for me are non-negotiable, right? It is that mindset of saying, I'm responsible for my pain. Because, of course, I can say something that hurts my partner, but inevitably the responsibility for that pain is still on the other side. Because I believe if that mindset isn't there for both partners, we get into control. We get into a relationship where we say, you need to act in accordance to how I want you to behave, and then I'm happy. And that's not free, right? And a relationship that isn't based on freedom doesn't work. And that doesn't mean, I also want to emphasize that if you see that in your current relationship, that you're doomed. It's still, it just invites you to see, oh, there's something I can break free from. There's something I can work through. Right? I have relationship issues in my current relationship, and I'm working through them. It's an invitation for us, for both of us.
How early on should that conversation be had, you think, about values? And obviously, like you say, it's a continuous progress but should this be happening on the second, third, fourth, fifth date? In what way do you recommend this? Because some people might feel like, oh, this feels like an interview process, checking the boxes. On the other hand, it's very important with values.
Yeah. I mean, you can start that. I don't know how someone would go through that conversation. I certainly didn't go through a checklist, or I didn't have these things in my mind where I said, okay, I'll ask you like this.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, what do you think about children? Okay, Chris, where do you want to live at the end of the life, right? I didn't go through it like that. I just have them in the back of my mind, and they rule almost every relationship that I have. They are always present for me, these values. But of course, there isn't any harm in just sitting down with the other person and say, hey, I really like you. I would like to see if this can go further. But I have some questions. Like, I would really like to see if we align on these values. And you can do that on the second date. You can do that on the third date. I know it may seem very awkward, but it can be very charming for the other person too, because they say, "Wow, okay, they like me. I'm also curious, right?" I think it gets to be in the interest of both people to see if the values align. And the earlier you have that conversation and can find out this does align or doesn't align, the more pain you can save yourself from.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I with my current partner, throughout the very first date, I had conversations about then on the second date. I remember speaking about children on the second date, and right at the time, my partner said, "Well, she doesn't really know if she wants to have children." That was her state at the time, and I had the same. I felt like, for a long time I've always wanted children. Right now I am in the state where I don't know. Now we're both in the state where we want to have children. Not now, but in the future. So that's where it can also change. But also really listen if someone says, I don't want to have children. Listen. All right, if that's something that is important for you. Don't try to change them. Right? Take them for who they say they are.
Yeah.
That's very important.
And ask, like,
Yeah.
Would you be open to, rather than changing them, but would you be open to?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. That's a good way to phrase that. Right. You can ask, hey, do you want to have children for you? And then they could say, right now, I don't feel like that. And then you could say, okay, is that something you're fixed on? Right. It's important to ask these questions. Values are very important for a relationship because that's what they are based on ultimately. Right.
How important is it to have regular check-ins when it comes to these things? Can it be done on a weekly basis, bi-weekly? Obviously, everyone has their own, but
I personally, in my relationship, I don't do check-ins like that. I certainly have a lot of conversations with my partner, and we do touch on very important topics like the future very frequently. But for me, it's a natural progression. I would say if someone has a history of denying reality or lying to themselves about who the partner actually is, then okay, check in, have that check in, like ask your significant other what their view is on stuff like that. But I personally do not do regular check-ins on things like that.
Yeah.
But of course, and I think once there isn't alignment, I think that becomes evident very naturally if we are in tune with ourselves and if we're in tune with the other person.
Yeah. And it comes back to ownership once again. Right? If I feel like something is off with my relationship and I'm not happy about certain things, it's about for me to speak up about that in a good way.
Exactly.
Where I'm not attacking, but I'm expressing how I'm feeling, and I want to be heard, and I want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be an attack, right? We could try to be as conscious as we can. Sometimes it can come out as an attack. Then it's about later on owning that and once again saying, hey, that wasn't cool how I started that conversation. That wasn't cool how I treated you. I don't want to do that next time. And I apologize for it. But yeah, speaking up, going to your partner, taking them serious, taking yourself serious, saying, hey, this is something that's really on my mind. And that can be a painful conversation. Yeah. But it's absolutely necessary.
Nice. We're coming a bit towards the end. A couple last questions here.
Yeah.
How are you looking to grow personally in 2025? Could be anything, but it could also be specifically in your relationship.
I want to grow in my business. I want to be clear on my message. I want to reach more people and give them help them in their relationship, give them the things that would really help them instead of, because of what I see a lot out there is this. There's a lot of stuff out there that I personally do not agree with. All that advice and the tools, and they just work like a band-aid on the wound, but actually don't really address the wound. So I want to be very clear with my messaging and want to get that out there for way more people, which is creating more content, creating more impact. In my relationship, my partner and I, we want to move back to Europe. Right now we live in Bali and we want to move back to Europe. So finding probably right now more a temporary home, potentially already a long-term home. And I let myself be surprised by life, what the triggers are that get into my way and what will happen for me. I'm very much curious. I personally, for a long time, I did set goals, also monetary goals. I got away from that. I way more want to let myself be guided with how I feel. How do I want to feel? What's in the way of me feeling that way? How can I create that more for myself? And certainly because what happened a lot to me was there was an attachment to whatever monetary goal I had. And that didn't make me feel good. I felt fear or I felt pressure, and that doesn't work for me. So, yeah, I want to create more impact with my business, with my message, and I want to be a better partner to my girlfriend, and want to find a home in Europe again. Yeah.
I love hearing that. And I feel like I relate to that a lot, where it's such a good North Star with how are we feeling instead. I said to myself also, let me just focus on all the things I enjoy doing and do very little of the things I don't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Instead of these monetary goals or anything else that's...
And that is something I admire about you and your message and how you really live that. And I mean, I know you from the local gym here that we both go to, but that is something that I really admire about you, that I can see you're very active in the pursuit of your free time activities, and you live a life that is very desirable for a lot of people. And I love that. I love that you also speak about that so much.
Thanks a lot. Is there anything else that you feel like we haven't touched upon?
Oh, there's a lot that we could touch on. But for now, I think I feel complete.
A part 2 sometime.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely love that. I love how you open up the space here. The conversation seems very calm and easy. I love being here. I'd love to be on a second episode with you.
That's great feedback.
Yeah.
What does deeply aligned mean to you?
Feeling aligned, it's a feeling once again. Feeling centered in myself, being myself. So deeply aligned is, I would translate it to deeply being myself. When I am in alignment with myself, it just clicks. Everything clicks. Miracles start to show up. Yeah.
That has been a good theme in this podcast episode, I think. I hope people hear that and take notes.
Yeah.
For the next guest, if you were to state a question to them without knowing who the guest is, we're trying to do this thing where, each guest is giving another question to the next one.
Yeah.
What would you like to ask them?
What do you believe makes you special? Because I believe every person that is on this planet has something that makes them special. And yeah, I believe that would be a good question.
Very good one. I love it. Amen to that. This has been a pleasure, really. I love the conversation, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the very good questions. Thank you for being prepared so well, and I loved it. Thank you.
Finally, if people want to dig into your world a bit more, where can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, Sven Loss. I don't know if I have an underscore in it. No, I have Sven_Loss, or my website, svenloss.com. And I'm also on TikTok, not as active, but those are the 3 main platforms.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.